All right, guys, welcome back to the Rattling the Brain podcast. We're on season 4, episode 5. Today, we have an amazing guest joining us. We have Keegan Matheson in here. Keegan works for the MLB and the Toronto Blue Jays as a reporter. Keegan, thank you so much for joining us.
Man, happy to. Thank you for having me.
So, just kind of starting out in your early career, you went to Dalhousie University. At what point in your career, kind of walk us through, when did you realize that sports media was something that you wanted to venture off into?
It took me kind of screwing some things up first, to be honest with you. Because I grew up in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, which is about an hour and a half from Halifax, and then went to Halifax for university. And, I'd watch TSN, I'd read the newspaper and stuff, but nobody around me was a sports reporter, right? Like, you knew what a doctor did or a teacher or whatever because you went to the doctor and you have a teacher, but I didn't know what a sports reporter or baseball writer looked like. And I think that's why it took me a bit to get into it. I knew that I loved writing and I knew that I loved baseball, like very simply, but it didn't seem realistic. Not that it seemed too big or too grand, but it didn't seem like a real job, frankly. I took English and writing in university, and out of that, I actually ended up working a job at a bank and hated it, completely miserable, quit, walked out, and kind of needed that. I needed to kind of get kicked in the ass by the real world a little bit to realize that like I'm not the type of person who can adapt to something that I don't like.
Right.
That's probably not a good thing either. It's not an exciting thing. It's just I wasn't that adaptable. And when I realized that, I accepted that I really needed to do something that I enjoyed and was passionate about. Some people jump right into doing that. I took a bit of a detour and I needed to realize it was necessary. But growing up, always it was baseball for me. And always it was writing in English class. I was like your classic smart kid. I'm sure I got good grades in math and maybe maybe this backdrop behind me would be a little nicer if I went down the math path. Who knows? But I loved English and I loved writing. And I finally, I had been blogging and podcasting and doing some things online, but that was kind of my lesson to say, screw it. Like let's try this. And if it doesn't work, I can come back and maybe I'll figure out how to be less miserable doing a normal job. But I think I reached a point where I had to do it. And when it was necessary, I guess it was easier to start.
I'm also curious, what's the baseball scene like in Nova Scotia? Obviously, there's only a handful of MLB players from Nova Scotia, but is baseball big in Nova Scotia? Is that something like there's a big audience for, or was it kind of small?
Definitely, so still big, and lots of Red Sox fans too, just given like regional TV coverage back before streaming and everything. A lot of really good baseball, a lot of good youth baseball played, especially up in Cape Breton. Like I'd think my teams were good, then we would go to Cape Breton and just get absolutely pounded. But I grew up, like I'm 35 now, so I grew up kind of in the era of like Sidney Crosby and summer hockey becoming a thing, right? So baseball started to lose a lot of the best athletes in town or in the county to summer hockey, which, you know, I say sucks. If you're a hockey fan, maybe it's a good thing. But I am a big believer in playing multiple sports, even if you're a star in one of them. So I don't think it's a good thing, or at least it wasn't at the time. So a lot of good baseball growing up. By the time you get to high school, it really petered out. There was not a lot of elite baseball or travel baseball. I was no type of player. I was good when I was really young, just because I was big before the other kids. That's all it was. But still, like a lot of baseball fans, like especially when you get a little more out in the country, up in Cape Breton and stuff. Some very good baseball.
What position did you play?
Third base and catcher. I had an arm back then, but I was a DH probably by the age of 8.
A
So
little power
not much
hitter?
in the future there.
Power hitter?
Definitely.
A little bit of
Big
Vladdy
power
for you?
hitter. But thank we played on big fields, so I could never quite make the fence, but power hitting DH before the age of 10.
There you go. I want to talk to you a little bit about your first job in the industry. So, what was kind of your first opportunity that you got in the industry? And what do you think that that opportunity taught you about the industry?
The first real job I had, because I did a lot of blogging and podcasting and stuff, and I've kind of struggled with how to look back on that because I got caught up in one of those god awful blog networks that just wants you to write a million blog posts for free. Big both middle fingers up to all of those, hate them. But it also helped me get where I am. So I've struggled with how to frame that in my mind. I went to Centennial College in Toronto for the sports journalism program. And out of that, the first, quote unquote, real place I was Sportsnet, very briefly for an internship. Um, that kind of gave me a lesson on how like newsrooms worked, on the fact that a writer goes out into the world and writes a story, sends it back to the desk. Other people handle the website, handle the copy. It made me appreciate how much work goes into doing a story properly, which I had not learned blogging. That's just what can you puke up as quickly as possible. That is empty calories, low quality, full of mistakes. So this taught me how to do it the right way. Out of that, my first job, where I made $1, it was the MLB.com internship. We don't have it anymore, which sucks, but it was the 2017 season, and you'd get hired. We called it an associate reporter. It meant intern for a full season. And back then, Gregor Chisholm, who's at the Star now, my good buddy, he was the reporter. So I was essentially his number two.
Right.
So if a guy made a cool catch, I'd write the quick little story. If some kind of grunt work needed to be done, or if somebody had to wait around for an interview, I would do that. And that was my introduction to covering a beat, which was pretty cool. That team sucked. It was kind of right after the 15 and 16 teams, and like Bautista and Donaldson were on that team, but they were out of gas. Like it was just a really terrible season.
Right.
But it was a good time to learn because there wasn't much of a crowd around. The expectations were kind of low. Really cool to be around. But that taught me how a beat works, like how to go about my day, who not to piss off, how to ask for things, how to build a story, and learned a lot. Some of it by screwing up, some of it by watching other writers, but definitely learned a lot.
So when you were there, is that what you wanted to do? Was there a point in your career where you were thinking, like, because obviously you did some writing, you're on air all the time. At that point in your career, did you know exactly what you wanted to do? Was there a goal there where you're more focused on broadcasting, writing? And why did you decide to stick with where you were at?
I was always writing.
Right.
The broadcast stuff, like I have never in my life sought out or asked for TV or radio, anything. That's all come naturally. I never went looking for it at all. And now it's a big part of my day to day, which is weird. But I always just wanted to write. I wanted to write about baseball, period. And that, like at MLB, like where I still am now, it was the perfect place to do it, I think. And it remains that way. But everything else kind of came naturally. Like radio came naturally, and at at the start I was doing all the 6 a.m. shows, and I would do the 1 in the morning overnight show that like five people were listening to, but it was a start. And then TV kind of came slowly as I'd start out doing like some local news networks and stuff. So I never imagined, and I never planned to be doing what I'm doing now, like with TSN and Overdrive and all that stuff. Never in the plan. Like it came naturally, and that's why I feel good about it. When it does come, I know too many people who play the networky game and beg for stuff along the way, and then when they get it, they suck at it, and yeah. I'm glad that I've done it slowly. It fits my style a bit more, but always wanted writing, and everything else has just kind of come by itself, really, at this point.
So I like what you said about the fact that you were doing grunt work, right? So you worked at 1 a.m., you did very few viewers, you'd have to wait around. So
Yeah.
one thing I really struggle with, and I know a lot of people in my industry struggle with, is we love what we do, but the one tough part is consistency. I find that being consistent is the tough part. And, I've done probably 40 episodes of this podcast now, and some get great views, some don't. But when there's a dry spell, what's a little piece of advice you can give to sports media students and people in the industry to try and make sure that they can stay consistent over a long period of time?
Yeah, I still struggle with that, man. I was thinking about this last week because, like, end of last season, I was covering a World Series run.
Yeah.
I was getting 40 plus TV requests a day. I'm on every radio station. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm at the ballpark. I'm in the middle of it all day, every day.
Yeah.
And what I don't think I realized at the time was that that was a massive adrenaline ride. Like I was just maxed out, barely sleeping for 2 months.
Yeah.
And then I got to the off season and it was kind of depressing. Like when the off season started, like I'm just kind of sitting here. Nobody wants to hear from me anymore. Now, then last week I went in and I hosted Overdrive and I had that high again.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, like this is what I miss. And I used to do an even worse job of that, but I guess that what I'm saying is that it sticks around. And it's a strange job because the highs are very high
Yeah.
I'm in a clubhouse after they just walked off a game in the MLB playoffs. Like I'm in there after they've clinched the ALCS and they're spraying champagne everywhere. That's not a normal workplace, you know? And when you come down from that, sometimes you can come way down from that. And I've tried to do a better job of finding balance and finding things outside of baseball that make me happy or that fulfill me. Like when I'm at home, like when I'm in this house, like normally like this is my TV backdrop behind me. Most baseball people have like baseball bats and gloves and cards. No, like I have zero baseball in my house. I don't really watch baseball when I'm at home because I'm working during baseball hours. I don't read a ton of baseball. I'm not listening to baseball podcasts. Once I'm home, I'm reading another book. I'm playing video games. I'm watching basketball or the NFL. Like I try to take my mind out of it. That's a mistake I made earlier in my career because when a dry spell would come, I would obsess over it.
Right.
Because now when it comes, I think, okay, like let me just turn my brain off, chuck $10 in a football game and zone out for a while. Or let me play a video game with my buddies for a couple hours at night or read a book, watch a movie. And I don't think I did a good enough job of that because this industry sells you the real BS idea of a lot of fake hustle. And I wasted so much time when I was younger fake hustling. Like, oh, I've got to be the first one there every game. No, you don't. Like, you just don't. It's BS. It doesn't count. Nobody cares. And I used to think that I had to write 100 stories a week. You don't. Two good stories are way better than 100 terrible stories. No one's going to remember. So I think I've learned to pace myself a little bit more, but I've had to find a life outside of baseball because I still work with a lot of people whose life is just baseball, and it looks really ugly. Like I don't like that.
Yeah. And one of my favorite interviews I've ever done was Paul Rose, an Olympic gold medalist from the Paralympics, one of my good
Yeah.
friends. And what he was telling me was pretty much what you were saying, just in a different setting, how when he was playing for the gold medal, it was the biggest high, everything was great. But then when you're away from that and you're not in the spotlight, no one wants to hear from you, it's a little bit tough. But I kind of want to talk about the mental aspect of when you're kind of in the thick of it and things are really busy for you. How do you manage burnout? So it's a 162
Mm.
game season. It's a very long year. How do you kind of manage your mental health during the year to make sure you're not getting burned out?
Man, not always well. I've definitely I've burnt out before, and I've learned that that's not just like a fluff term,
Right.
like it's a real physical thing. This was 2 years ago, I think, 2023 season. Like I totally hit a wall. I burnt out in August. That was the year, maybe it's 2024, but it was the year that I was writing my book. It came out last year, but the year prior to that, I was writing my book while covering the Blue Jays still, and I completely hit a wall. Like I would get to work, I would have zero in the tank. I didn't care about anything. I felt sick all the time, and it's a nightmare. I've learned like I call them like me and a couple of the guys who cover the team. We joke we call them like a DH day, where like if I don't have a story to write pregame, do I need to get there at 2 o'clock and do 5 hours of pregame work, or is there a day once or twice a month where I can kind of show up an hour before the game, have a meal and do my job, you know? Um, I've got to accept that like I travel more than any reporter probably, which is a killer. I don't love the travel anymore. But I've had to accept there's times where I need to be a little kinder to myself. And I've struggled with that because since I am always there, people expect me to always be there. And it drives me like nothing, my buddies who cover the team with me know this, nothing sets me off more than when I will take like 2 days off in the middle of the season. And when I come back, everyone's, wow, where were you, man? Big vacation.
Yeah.
And I want to knock those people out. I want to punch them in the face
Oh, yeah.
because they cover half the games as me, right? But because I'm so constantly there, it's noticeable when I'm not there. It creates this horrible dynamic where it feels like people are taking attendance on you.
High
But
expectation.
yeah, exactly. So I've had to get away from that. I've had to find days. Spring training is a good example too. Do I need to be there at 8 a.m. every single day? No. If I already have a story written for that day, I'll just go to the game. Or if the Blue Jays are playing a 3 hour drive away, which would mean 4 hours coming home in Florida traffic, maybe I just say screw it and stay back at the complex and find a good story there. There's ways to do this job without ruining your life, and I think too many people kind of romanticize that in a weird way, where it's like, oh, I work all these hard hours, blah blah. Sometimes, yeah, it sucks, totally. But I think too many people try to wear that as a badge of honor, and I definitely made that mistake when I was younger, but trying not to now.
I like it. And I want to go back to your book. You were talking about it. Obviously, the
Yeah.
book just came out in 2025. The franchise, great read for those of you that don't know. If you love the Blue Jays, I'm more of a hockey guy, but
Yep.
baseball is probably my second. And I would consider myself a diehard Jays fan. If you want to learn about the Jays from their droughts from the 90s to 2014 or the 2016 run, that book was definitely great. So you guys should definitely give that a look. I wanted to ask you, when did you decide to write that book? Was that something you knew you wanted to do, kind of cover your career, or was that something someone brought to you? How did that come to happen?
Yeah, I'd talked to publishers about books in the past, but I didn't feel like I was ready because the thinking I had was that like this book is 32 chapters roughly. Probably 20 of those chapters had to be retellings of story. Like I'm not going to write a book without a Bautista chapter, without a Joe Carter home run chapter. Like those have been written before, not only by me, but by everyone who's covered the team for 30 years.
Right.
Ideally, my version or my retelling is good or fresh or reads differently. But those other 10 or 12 chapters, I needed to have stuff I could add. And 5 years ago, I didn't. I didn't. Now, unfortunately, like some of the stuff, like COVID happened and the Blue Jays missed Otani. Like those aren't great things, but they were at least new stories that I felt belonged to me.
Right.
And like I try to think a lot about people who have covered the team before me and writers and broadcasters who have covered the players and the teams before I showed up. And I think of it as me kind of contributing to something that already exists at
Right.
this point. And if I'm going to do that, I need to add something. So I wanted it to wait until I was adding something. And I finally felt like I got there. My dog's excited about this. She loves the book. Calm
Very
down.
nice. Very nice.
There's a dog, 3 floors away barking. So this 2 pound dog is going to defend me. But I felt I needed to add something. And this publisher who I work with, Triumph Publishing, who's just been so great to me, they brought it to me again a couple of years ago, and I felt it was the right time. It was actually at the Otani winter meetings that I was negotiating the contract, so that was a pretty stressful
Yeah.
few
So
days for me.
it's
But it worked out, but definitely needed the right timing.
yeah. So a little bit more about the Blue Jays. You've written a lot of articles for them. I've checked out a couple of them. What would you say is your favorite article that you've written? So maybe there's one that stands out. I know you've probably written hundreds of thousands of articles, but is there one, maybe one early in your career, maybe a certain one that you really like? Do you have a favorite
Yeah.
article you've written?
I'm trying to think of a few that come to mind. Because I call most of my work like factory work. I just
Yeah.
show up, what happened at the game, boom, write the story. I leave, we all forget what I did, and that's cool. Um, I think back to some of the longer stories I've written. The year before Gabriel Moreno was traded to the D-backs, me and Julia Kreutz wrote a story together about Moreno. And it meant a lot to me because working on a story with one of my best friends, but also combining our talents and working together for something that was better than I would have been able to do by myself. That was really cool. I think back to this past year working on an Alejandro Kirk story, because most days my work doesn't like surprise me. Like I show up, Vladdy hits a homer, I write a story about it. Like frankly, whatever. Okay, like it's cool for a day, but whatever. It's empty calories. But the idea of the Kirk story I wrote this past year was that I've covered his whole career and I have no clue who he is. So that was fun. Like I got to ask people and dig around and then I think probably my favorite from this year was the story I wrote on Vladdy when I went to his house on his daughter's birthday. We did this with MLB Network. We had some cameras, but went to Vladdy's house with his family, and it was his daughter's 8th birthday, I think it was. And I sat at a table with them while they were making like friendship bracelets together. And that's the stuff that keeps me excited, because I've covered every home run Vladdy's ever hit. None of them, and not that they don't excite me, but they all kind of look the same,
Yeah.
right? They're pretty cool. The World Series ones are a little cooler,
Absolutely.
sure, but I've written Vladdy homers literally 100 times. So to be able to see him outside of that element and outside of a field, outside of the ballpark where he's the king, right? To see him being in a normal setting with his daughter, with his family, that's cool. That's the stuff that excites me. And I try to do something like that every couple months, even just for myself, just to keep me mentally fresh. Because otherwise, this job can be a drag.
Yeah.
You know, I it's that's why when I give some of my friends a hard time who cover hoops or NHL, they say, "Oh, I'm back to the grind." I say, "Shut up! No, you're not.
Yeah.
Like, it's no, go cover another practice, right?" So it's such a drag day to day to day to day during the season. Um, Stepping back to write a story like that kind of freshens it up. So I've learned to value that a bit more.
So that's what I like, right? You get to see a little bit more of a more relaxed and more human side to
Yeah.
these players, right? You get to see them a little bit more away from the ballpark. But I was wondering, has that kind of changed how you storytell in a way, considering the fact that you can maybe see these guys in more of a human side, where maybe the average fan will be like, "Oh, Vladdy's on a 3-game hitless streak. He's got to do this. He's got to do that." Being able to kind of like form a little bit of a connection and build trust with those players, do you kind of feel that that's helped you in your reporting game at all?
I think it has. And frankly, doing the book changed a lot for me too, because it made me step back a little bit and be less alarmist. You know, like if Vladdy's on a 5-game hitless streak, whatever. I'm still gonna write the story, but I think I have a broader view of things now. Whereas before the book and before these last couple of years, I was too far inside everything, and it was just every day like hammering, hammering, hammering. Whereas now, I think I have the confidence and just the experience, I guess, to if the Jays lose 6-0 and nothing interesting actually happens in the game, I
Yeah.
might not even write about the loss. I might just use that day to write a completely different story
Right.
because I understand now that it's one of 162. And having a bit of a relationship with the players helps as well. Not buddy buddy, not super friendly, and I don't want to be, and they don't want to be with me. That's cool. Too many reporters try to be like, "Hey man, what's up?" Shut up. Like just they don't want to be your friend, and I should not want to be theirs. What I want is just mutual respect
Yeah.
and that we can just like each other as people, you know? Like I'm not trying to I always tell new players when they come to Toronto, like I'll introduce myself. I'll say like ever have a problem, like you let me know. I'm always around. And like if I make your day worse, it's probably making my day worse too. So like I'm never trying to piss you off. I'm never trying to make your day more difficult. Because if it is, mine's probably getting twice as difficult too. You know, it's there's a way to exist together that's easy. And like I have no problem now. I think the last spring training, went up to George Springer in the dugout and I said, "What's up, man? Like this spring has been the dog did not like the George Springer story, but it's I walked up to him and I said, "Listen, man, like your spring has been really bad. Last season was really bad. I'm gonna write a story about it. Like, is it cool if we talk?" And I think that's better than going, and writing a story behind a guy's back and having them read it, you know? So I have no problem asking a guy why they suck. I have no problem asking them what might be considered a hard question. Like, I don't think it's scary.
Right.
I think that the guys understand I'm always there and that if it needs to be asked, like, might as well, right? So I think there's a level of respect that I'll respect their time and respect what they do.
Did that get easier to do as you became more of a veteran reporter? Like when you first started, was it a little bit more difficult to write those stories, or was it always, something you were comfortable with?
Oh, definitely. Like there was a couple times I thought a player was going to knock me out. Like
Yep.
it's scary at first, especially when they don't know you, and especially when I'm younger, you know. But it's such a thing that you learn and you develop, and it takes time. Like some people are just Mr. Networky. Hey, nice to meet you. Blah blah blah. It's taken me some time, but by the time George has been here for 5 years, or Vladdy or Bo have been here for 5 or 6 years, they understand that I'm always around, and they understand that my work is the stuff that shows up on the team website or on TSN or Overdrive and stuff like that. And they're smart. Like it takes some time, but they eventually can pick which reporter does which, you know, because I don't like to be bulked in with other reporters. That pisses me off sometimes, right? So it's been good to develop those. I'm slower than most people to do that just because I don't like to blast guys with it. I like to just let it happen naturally, but definitely does happen. Definitely helps.
So I've been a Blue Jays fan my whole life. I want you to give me one niche player, maybe a guy who most people wouldn't think of. Could be former, could be a current player. What's one guy who you feel you have a good relationship with? Someone maybe who's funny, maybe someone who's, maybe off camera, a funny guy. Do you have any players that you really like? Maybe one that stands out?
Man, I'm trying to think through the current team to start. Everyone already knows Ernie Clement's great, but
Yeah,
I love working with Ernie.
yeah.
I keep telling him he's going to be a media darling someday on TV. Kevin Gausman's probably one of my favorite players I've ever covered. And what I love about Gosman is that he's just very genuine and thoughtful. Like there's times where I'll ask him, like, "Hey man, like your splitter was amazing tonight. Why'd that happen?" And he'll think for a second. He'll be like, "Keegs, I have no idea, man. But like, if you see anything, let me know because it was really cool." And I think, like, come on, like this guy feels like he hasn't gone through that media training that makes you boring again. I started out covering teams that had Bautista, Stroman, Donaldson, Encarnacion, Russ Martin, Tulowitzki. Like all of those guys were pretty rough around the edges. Like if you screwed up with them, they would tell you to beat it. And that's cool. Like that's fine. I missed that kind of. The current teams are a little more low key, a little easier to be around. But I always love working with catchers. Always love the kind of the bench guys, which Ernie Clement once was. But Gosman is probably one of my favorite conversations to have on the team. He's a guy, I hope he sticks around beyond this year, but a fascinating guy. Really like who he is. He's always been really good to me.
I love it. And just one more question I had to leave you off with. I was kind of curious. You as a reporter right now, if you can go back and tell your younger self one thing, maybe one piece of advice to make kind of maybe the journey a little bit smoother, what's that one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self to help them excel in this industry?
I think I would urge myself to be less focused on what other people are doing because most of it's BS.
Right.
And what I mean by that, like there's lots of other things I do. I would try to take better care of myself. I would try to work more efficiently and work smarter. But I think a mistake that I used to make was looking around and saying, "Oh, this person's my age and they're already doing this." The secret to this industry that nobody wants to tell anyone is that all of those people announcing on Twitter, "Oh, I cover the Raptors now. I cover the most of those grand announcements you see are someone really just announcing that they're getting 20 bucks an article to cover the team for a blog network. They want everyone to think that they are a full-time beat reporter, and I don't want to take that away from them because they're doing the work, but there are lies being told. And what they're not telling you is that they have a 9 to 5 to support what they're doing on the side. Coming up, I didn't know that. So I would look at this and be like, well, how is this person? Like, I think I'm better than that person. How are they covering the team? How are they covering the Raptors already? How are they writing about the NBA or the NFL already? And I'm kind of coming slower behind. What I know now is that a lot of it's just complete fluff
Right.
and to focus a bit more on myself. And I'm always someone that comes along a bit slower. And because I'm not going to barge in and try to network my way to the top in a day, right? Like I would rather just quietly slip into the room, do really good work, and then a year or two down the road have that rewarded. And that's worked out for me. It's how everything's gone. Like the TSN stuff and everything I'm doing now, I've never sought that out. I never went looking for it ever. And I think that coming up, I spent way too much time worrying about what other people around me were doing because I took all of it at face value. When really looking back, it was a lot of empty posturing sometimes. So there's a lot of that out there. And I think, I mean, the goal at the end of the day is to work in sports and not have to do any other work,
Right.
pay the bills. We all know that we're not going to have a mansion, whatever. Like, if we can work in sports, pay rent, have a beer, buy groceries, life's good. And I think I got a little too frantic, setting the bar a little too high there early on with other stuff. But now if I were to start again, I would see, people like my peers coming up announcing those things. I want to be happy for them, and that's important. Like it's important to celebrate the people around you.
Yeah.
But I'd also let myself realize, okay, that doesn't really mean that they have a 100K salary and that they're making. It just means that they're going a different way than you. And I think I made that mistake coming up.
Love it. And also, like, I love your story too, right? A little bit more of a unorthodox way of getting into
Yeah,
the industry where, a lot of people were, doing it from a younger age and kind of figuring out their way. But it's cool to see that you can make it. And obviously, I think you kind of got like, I want to say a little bit of a dream job, right? Like, I think a lot of people
yeah.
in my program are, trying to get to that spot. So it's really cool to hear your story. And one more time, just for all the viewers listening to this, check out that book. It's a really good book, The Franchise. And I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast. Obviously, I'm a huge Jays fan. I've been following you for a couple of years, so it's really cool to be able to hear your story. And yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely, Aaron, man. Appreciate it. Anytime at all.
All right, guys, that's the end of this episode. Hope you all enjoy. Follow along. There'll be plenty more coming.